Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. A British judge has ruled WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange can appeal a December court decision to extradite him to the U.S. Assange faces espionage charges and up to 175 years in prison for publishing evidence of U.S. war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan. His fiancée, Stella Morris, just spoke in front of the courthouse.
That we had raised point of law of general public importance, and that the Supreme Court has good grounds to hear this appeal. The situation now is that the Supreme Court has to decide whether it will hear the appeal. But make no mistake, we won today in court.
Julian Assange's lawyers and advocates have warned his mental and physical health have been steadily deteriorating, and a lower court judge last year ruled Assange should not be extradited as he posed a possible suicide risk if locked up in the United States. In pandemic news, U.S. health officials say they're cautiously optimistic the Omicron-fueled surge will soon pass its peak, though many hospitals continue to be overwhelmed with patients, and the country is still averaging over 2,000 deaths per day. In legal news, a federal judge on Friday blocked the Biden administration's vaccine mandate for federal workers and contractors. The Justice Department's appealed the ruling, which could end up at the Supreme Court. The White House says about 98% of government workers have already been vaccinated. The U.S. State Department's reducing non-essential personnel at its embassy in Ukraine and has ordered family members of diplomats to leave, citing a threat of Russian military action. President Biden's reportedly now weighing the possibility of sending up to 5,000 U.S. troops to the region and deploying warships and aircraft to NATO ally countries. NATO members say they have put forces on standby. The U.S. also sent a new delivery of military equipment to Ukraine. This comes after talks between Secretary of State Antony Blinken and his counterpart, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, Friday failed to make any breakthroughs on the escalating tensions at the Russia-Ukraine border, where some 100,000 Russian troops have been amassed. Blinken is joining a meeting of European Union foreign ministers today over the crisis. In Yemen, scores of people are dead after the U.S.-supported Saudi-led coalition launched a heavy aerial assault on territory controlled by Houthi rebels. One attack Friday destroyed a prison in northern Yemen near the Saudi border, with reports of 82 killed and dozens more trapped under the rubble. Among the dead are African migrants who'd been detained while attempting to cross Yemen to seek work in Saudi Arabia. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres condemned the bombings and called for an investigation, as did families of prisoners who visited the site.
We came from Amran province on a visit to find out that the prison has been hit by warplanes. This is a crime to be added to their crimes, and this makes us more determined to face their aggression. And we want concerned bodies to investigate this.
Another Saudi-led coalition airstrike on Friday severed internet service across all of Yemen. Elsewhere, the United Arab Emirates says it thwarted an attack by Yemen's Houthi rebels intercepting 2 ballistic missiles fired at Abu Dhabi. This comes a week after Houthi drones and missiles killed 3 Emirati civilians. In northeastern Syria, more than 150 people have been killed after Islamic State fighters launched a coordinated assault on a prison aiming to free men and boys held captive by a U.S.-backed Syrian Kurdish militia. The attack prompted the U.S. military to call in airstrikes from helicopter gunships. The prison remains under siege, with Kurdish fighters claiming the Islamic State is using hundreds of boys as human shields. Nearly 700 children of alleged Islamic State fighters have been held at the prison by a U.S.-backed Kurdish militia known as the Syrian Democratic Forces. Last year, a United Nations report found conditions inside the jail amount to torture, with prisoners packed into overcrowded cells and denied sunlight, medical care, and proper nutrition. In Afghanistan, at least 7 people were killed Saturday after a bomb went off on a bus in the western city of Herat. Taliban leaders are holding 3-day talks in Oslo with Afghan civil society representatives and officials from the U.S. and European nations. The parties are expected to discuss women's rights as well as access to billions of dollars in frozen assets and aid money. The UN warns foreign sanctions are leading Afghanistan to an even worse humanitarian disaster, with some 23 million Afghans facing extreme hunger and nearly 9 million at risk of famine. In Burkina Faso, President Roch Kabore has reportedly been detained by mutinous soldiers in an apparent coup. Several reports say he's being held in a military camp. Gunfire erupted Sunday at military bases in the capital as soldiers revolted, angered by Kabore's government's failure to stop a years-long wave of attacks by Islamist extremists. More than 2,000 people have died in the violence. Hundreds of protesters also took to the streets of the capital Sunday, demanding Kabore's resignation. In Sudan, prominent women's rights advocate Amira Osman was detained after over a dozen armed men raided her home late Saturday in the capital, Khartoum. This is Osman's sister, Amani.
They stormed through the door and came into the house. There were so many of them, around 15 men and another 15 outside, carrying guns and Kalashnikovs.
Osman and other women's rights advocates played a crucial role in the uprising that led to the overthrow of former President Omar al-Bashir in 2019. Dozens of other high-profile political figures have been arrested since October 25th, when Sudan's military took control of the government in a coup. The Palestinian Authority is calling for an international commission to investigate a massacre committed by Israeli forces in the Palestinian village of Tantura in 1948. This comes after last week the Israeli newspaper Haaretz revealed there's a mass grave under the parking lot of the now popular Dor Beach of over 200 Palestinians executed by Zionist gangs in Tantura. 1948 marked the beginning of the violent Israeli occupation of Palestine, known as the Nakba. The chair of the House committee investigating the U.S. Capitol insurrection has revealed the committee has been speaking with former Trump Attorney General William Barr. Congressmember Benny Thompson shared the information in response to a question about a draft of an executive order released by Politico that was presented to Trump in December of 2020. The order would have directed the Secretary of Defense to seize voting machines in battleground states, among other things. In related news, the Justice Department charged a man Friday with publicly calling for the killing of Georgia election officials one day before the January 6th Capitol insurrection. Chad Christopher Stark of Texas called on Georgia patriots to, quote, put a bullet in one official. Stark is the first person to be charged under the Justice Department's Election Threats Task Force, which was created last June. The Arizona Democratic Party censured Senator Kyrsten Sinema Saturday for voting against a rules change that would have allowed Democrats to bypass a Republican filibuster and pass major voting rights legislation. In a statement, chair of the Arizona Democratic Party, Raquel Teran, said, quote, in the choice between an archaic legislative norm and protecting Arizonans' rights to vote, we choose the latter. The ramifications of failing to pass federal legislation that protects their rights to vote are too large and far-reaching, she said. In Mississippi, every single black state senator stood up and walked out as the Republican-led Senate passed a bill that would ban the teaching of critical race theory in public schools. This is State Senator Barbara Blackman speaking ahead of the walkout.
This bill is not morally right. I heard this gentleman say he talked to his African-American friend, and I guess everybody has an African-American friend. There are 14 black senators in this chamber, and these 14 black senators are telling you that this bill is morally wrong.
The bill passed 32-2 with the 2 votes against the bill cast by white Democratic senators. The Biden administration's ordered federal agencies to enact the new $15 an hour minimum wage for federal workers by the end of the month. The change will affect nearly 70,000 workers. Biden signed an executive order raising the minimum wage for federal workers and contractors last April. Here in New York City, new legislation granting protections and rights to delivery app workers goes into effect today. The new laws were pushed by the labor group Los Deliveristas, the Delivery Workers United, and essential workers who kept the city running throughout the pandemic. They include a fair minimum wage, tip transparency, and access to restaurant bathrooms. Workers say they will continue to push for more protections. This is Councilmember Carlina Rivera, one of the sponsors of the bill, speaking at a celebratory rally Sunday in Times Square.
Just a reminder of what these deliveristas go through. Remember, waist-deep flood waters to bring you your hot meal, your neighbor's medicine, violent attacks, theft, and even death. Many of them are not here to celebrate this moment with us. And so this is our obligation, is policy making with the foundation of immigrant, environmental, disability, and gender justice.
In Northern California, firefighters have contained about a third of a 1,000-acre wildfire near the coastal communities of Monterey and Big Sur. Hundreds of residents were evacuated over the weekend. The blaze is the first 100-acre-plus wildfire in the area to burn in the month of January in over a decade, as the climate crisis and a 2-decade drought have led to extended wildfire seasons. And the world-renowned Buddhist monk, poet, teacher, and anti-war activist Tiknot Han has died in his native Vietnam at the age of 95. Tiknot Han was exiled from Vietnam for decades, beginning in the 60s, after he spoke out publicly against the war. In 1966, he traveled to the United States and met with Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., helping to persuade King to speak out against the U.S. war in Vietnam. King went on to nominate Tiknot Han for the Nobel Peace Prize a year later, calling him an apostle of peace and nonviolence. Tiknot Han believed that Buddhist principles should be applied to everyday life and even to solve difficult political problems. This is a clip of an address he gave in Berkeley, California in the 1980s.
Mindfulness is the capacity to be aware of what is happening in the present moment. If we eat mindfully, if we drink mindfully, if we do things mindfully, but we are under the light of mindfulness. We know what to do in order to bring the elements of peace and joy to our body and to our feelings. We know what not to ingest in order to prevent the toxins, the poisons to enter our body and in our consciousness.
Again, Thich Nhat Hanh has died at the age of 95 in Vietnam. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.